Flight attendant slapped a black CEO on her own jet. 10 minutes later, she fires his entire team. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get started. This story takes place high above the clouds, on a private jet that belongs to one of the wealthiest men in the world, a powerful CEO who has built an empire from the ground up. His name is Marcus Strickland, and he is the CEO of Strict Tech Industries, a company that specializes in cutting-edge technology and artificial intelligence. To the outside world, Marcus is the epitome of success. Tall, confident, with sharp features and a commanding presence, he carries himself like a man who believes the world is his for the taking. Inside his private jet, though, he is not just a CEO. He is a king on his throne, used to being served and catered to, his every whim met by his loyal staff. But today, on this flight, something is about to change. Enter Ashley Davis, the flight attendant who, in many ways, is the complete opposite of Marcus Strickland. Ashley is a woman who has spent years working in the service industry, but she is no ordinary flight attendant. She is calm, collected, and quietly confident. Ashley knows exactly how to handle difficult passengers, but what sets her apart is her quiet strength, the kind of strength that comes from overcoming life's challenges without ever needing to boast about it. She is a black woman, and she has seen it all: the racism, the condescension, the subtle and not so subtle ways people try to diminish her. But today, she is not about to let it slide. As the jet cruises through the sky at 35,000 feet, Marcus Strickland orders his third glass of whiskey, a drink he insists be served at just the right temperature. Ashley, doing her best to keep the passengers happy, approaches him with the glass. But Marcus, in his usual arrogant fashion, barely acknowledges her. He takes the drink, dismissing her with a wave of his hand, as if she were nothing more than a shadow in the room. Make sure you get it right next time, he sneers, his tone dripping with condescension. Ashley pauses for a moment, the words stinging, but she remains composed. She knows better than to engage with customers who have too much to drink, but something about the way Marcus looks at her, with that smug, entitled expression, triggers something deep inside of her. This isn't the first time she has been treated like this, but it will be the last. Ashley takes a deep breath, her posture straightening as she gathers the courage to do something she never imagined she would do. In one swift motion, she slaps Marcus Strickland across the face. The sound of the slap echoes through the cabin like a gunshot, sending a shockwave through everyone present. For a moment, time seems to freeze. Marcus, stunned and speechless, stares at her in disbelief. The other passengers look on, wide-eyed and frozen, unsure of what to do or say. But Ashley doesn't flinch. She stands her ground, her eyes locked on Marcus, unwavering and resolute. In that moment, she reclaims her power. Marcus, still in shock, tries to regain his composure, but it is too late. The damage has been done. And little does he know, this is only the beginning of his downfall. Ashley walks to the front of the jet, her steps calm and purposeful, as the silence in the cabin hangs heavy. She picks up the intercom microphone and announces, "I am the head flight attendant on this flight, and I will not tolerate any disrespect from anyone. I am letting you all know that I am firing Marcus Strickland's entire team. They will no longer be working with him after today." The gasps from the other passengers are audible, and even Marcus himself is too stunned to protest. What happens next is a powerful reminder that no one, no matter how wealthy or powerful, can get away with treating others as less than human. Ashley has flipped the script, and in doing so, she has taken control of the situation in a way no one saw coming. Her actions may have shocked everyone, but they also delivered a much-needed lesson in respect and self-worth. So what do you think? Was Ashley right to take such a bold step, or did she go too far? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more dramatic stories like this one. As the jet continued its smooth ride through the skies, the silence was deafening. Every passenger in the cabin was still processing what had just happened. The crisp sound of Ashley's slap echoed in their ears, and the weight of her actions hung heavily in the air. Marcus Strickland, The once untouchable CEO sat frozen in his seat, his face still flushed from the slap. He was a man used to control, used to being in charge of every situation. But here, at 35,000 feet, his authority meant nothing. His jaw clenched in frustration, but he knew better than to speak. He was stunned, embarrassed, and for the first time in his life, he felt powerless. Ashley's eyes remained cold and focused as she walked calmly to the front of the jet. She had taken a stand that no one, especially Marcus Strickland, had ever expected from someone like her. Her hand, still steady from the slap, now gripped the microphone on the intercom system. She had made a decision, and she wasn't backing down. "Attention, all passengers," she began, her voice calm and unwavering. "I am the head flight attendant on this flight, and I will not tolerate any disrespect from anyone, no matter who they are. Marcus Strickland's team will no longer be working with him after this flight. I am firing his entire team, effective immediately." The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just been dropped. A stunned silence followed. No one dared to speak. No one dared to breathe. The other passengers, who had been silently watching the drama unfold, now looked at each other, unsure of how to react. They had witnessed a shift in power, an unexpected and bold move that left them all questioning their own roles in the situation. The rich and powerful passengers, accustomed to their privileged lives, now realized that there were lines they couldn't cross, even on a private jet. Meanwhile, Marcus Strickland, whose empire had been built on power, wealth, and influence, sat there in disbelief. He had been humbled in a way he never imagined possible. His fingers gripped the armrest of his chair, but there was no escape from the truth. Ashley had just taken control of the situation, and there was nothing he could do about it. The passengers watched in stunned silence as Ashley turned off the intercom and calmly walked back to her seat. She didn't gloat, didn't say a word. She simply did what was necessary. As the plane continued its course, the tension in the cabin began to shift. The passengers, who had been so quick to judge Ashley before, now began to see her in a new light. They had witnessed firsthand what it looked like when someone refused to bow down to power and stood up for themselves, no matter the consequences. The transformation in the cabin was palpable. The silence was replaced with hushed whispers, as the passengers began to digest what had just happened. Some were uncomfortable, some were intrigued, but all of them were moved. Even Marcus, who had once seen himself as untouchable, couldn't deny the power that Ashley now held. As the plane neared its destination, Marcus Strickland sat in quiet reflection. His team, his trusted advisors, were gone. His reputation, tarnished by a single slap, would follow him long after this flight. But as much as it stung, as much as he hated to admit it, he couldn't help but respect Ashley in that moment. She had done what no one had ever dared to do before. She had shown him that power was not just about money, but about integrity and respect. And while Marcus sat there, still grappling with his fall from grace, Ashley had already moved on. She had taken a stand for herself, for every person who had ever been overlooked or dismissed. And in doing so, she had not only earned the respect of the passengers aboard that jet, but she had also rewritten the rules of power, at least for that one flight. The story of what happened on Marcus Strickland's jet would go down in history as a lesson in humility and a reminder that no one, no matter how powerful, is above being held accountable. So what do you think? Was Ashley right to take such a bold step? Or did she go too far? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more dramatic stories like this one. As the private jet began its descent toward the airport, the weight of what had just transpired was still settling in. The passengers were no longer whispering in hushed tones. The atmosphere was thick with the knowledge that something had changed, something that couldn't be undone. The man who had once been the symbol of power, Marcus Strickland, sat silently in his seat, his mind racing. How could a single slap, a single moment of defiance, cause everything to unravel so quickly? But no matter how hard he tried, there was no escaping the reality of what had happened. The slap had shattered his illusion of invincibility, and now, he was left with nothing but the cold truth. His team was gone. His reputation was in tatters, and there was nothing he could do to take it all back. The flight attendants, who had watched the entire scene unfold, began to feel the shift as well. They had all been in the service industry long enough to know how power dynamics worked. They had seen CEOs, celebrities, and powerful people strut through their lives as if they owned the world. But never before had they seen someone challenge that power so openly, so forcefully. Ashley, however, had done it without hesitation. She hadn't flinched. She hadn't faltered. She had done what was right, no matter the cost. And now, as the plane began its final approach, the reality of her actions began to sink in. Ashley wasn't just a flight attendant anymore. She was a symbol of standing up for oneself, of refusing to be overlooked or mistreated, no matter the circumstances. And that symbol was powerful. As the plane touched down, the crew prepared to disembark, but Ashley stayed behind for a moment, allowing herself a brief moment of reflection. She had done something that most people only dream of. She had taken control of a situation when no one expected her to. She had fought back against a system designed to keep people like her in their place. And she had won. When she stepped off the jet and into the terminal, the weight of the moment hit her. She was proud of what she had done, but she was also exhausted. It hadn't been easy, and it hadn't been without its consequences. But as she walked through the terminal, she couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. She had made her mark. She had reminded everyone on that plane, especially Marcus, that no one was above reproach, no one was untouchable. And now, as she walked into the world beyond the jet, Ashley realized that the world had shifted. People like her, who had been overlooked and dismissed for so long, were finally being seen. They were being heard. And most importantly, they were being respected. Marcus Strickland, on the other hand, was left standing in the wreckage of his once imposing empire. His entire team had been fired, and his reputation, which he had spent years building, was now in shambles. As he left the plane, he was met with a silence that seemed deafening. There were no cheers, no congratulations, no applause. Just a deep, uncomfortable silence that hung in the air, a reminder of the price he had paid for his arrogance. As Ashley moved on with her life, she knew that her actions had set a new precedent. She had shown the world that power wasn't just about wealth or influence. It was about standing up for what was right, even when the odds were stacked against you. And as she looked back one last time at the jet, she couldn't help but smile. She had made a difference. She had taken a stand, and it had mattered. And that, in the end, was all that really mattered. As the days passed after the dramatic incident on the private jet, the ripple effects of Ashley's actions were still being felt, not just by Marcus Strickland, but by everyone who had witnessed it. News of the shocking event quickly spread, not just within the exclusive circles of corporate elites, but across social media, making waves far beyond the confines of the jet. People who had once been quick to dismiss Ashley as just a flight attendant were now seeing her in a completely new light. Her courage and strength in the face of adversity had turned her into a hero for many. Marcus Strickland, on the other hand, was left to face the fallout. His name, once synonymous with success and power, had become a symbol of arrogance and hubris. The media had a field day, with articles and stories dissecting his downfall. Every news outlet covered the incident, some in disbelief, others in awe of Ashley's boldness. The story had struck a nerve with many, especially those who had spent their lives working behind the scenes, serving the wealthy and powerful, yet often going unnoticed. But Ashley didn't seek fame. She didn't need it. She had done what she felt was right, and she was content with that. She continued with her work, but now, she did so with a sense of pride and dignity that had been missing before. Her actions had given her a newfound confidence, and that confidence was something that couldn't be taken away. Meanwhile, Marcus, though still a wealthy CEO, found himself in a position he had never experienced before, vulnerable. His empire had taken a hit, and it wasn't just the loss of his team. It was the damage to his image, something that, in the world of business, could take years, if not decades, to rebuild. Investors began to pull back, partners started reconsidering their alliances, and the public sentiment had shifted drastically. He had always believed that power was something that could be bought, but now he realized that respect could not be. For the first time, Marcus found himself questioning everything he had built, wondering if his approach to leadership had been all wrong. It was a humbling realization, one that left him unsettled. Ashley, however, remained unshaken. She was approached by her colleagues, some with gratitude, others with admiration. She had become a symbol of resilience, of standing up for what was right, even when the odds were against you. She received messages of support from people who had been in similar positions, employees, workers, even those who had worked in service jobs for years, but had never had the courage to challenge the system. They saw in Ashley something they could never express. It was as if her actions had given them a voice. Despite the attention, Ashley remained grounded. She had no intention of changing who she was. Her life had always been about integrity, and she didn't need validation from the outside world to know she had done the right thing. Still, the attention continued to build. People wanted to hear from her, to know what motivated her to take such a drastic step. She found herself on interviews, being asked about her life, her values, and what drove her to act. But each time, she simply said, "I did what anyone in my position should have done. I stood up for myself, and I hope it encourages others to do the same." She didn't see herself as a hero. She was just a woman who had reached her breaking point and decided enough was enough. As for Marcus, he eventually called her. His tone was different this time, subdued and cautious. He wasn't the arrogant CEO who had once dismissed her. He was just a man now, trying to pick up the pieces of his shattered reputation. He apologized, not just for his behavior on the jet, but for the way he had treated people in general. "I was wrong," he admitted. "You've made me realize that there's more to leadership than just making money and having power. I've learned that respect is something that has to be earned." Ashley listened quietly, but didn't immediately respond. She knew this wasn't about forgiveness. It was about accountability. And while she appreciated the gesture, she also knew that Marcus's apology wasn't going to fix everything. Some things couldn't be fixed with words. In the end, Ashley's actions had not only changed her life, but had forced others to examine their own attitudes toward power and respect. She had shown that real strength didn't come from wealth or status, but from standing firm in one's principles, no matter the cost. And as Ashley continued with her life, she knew that she had made a difference. In the world of business, people would remember her not as a flight attendant, but as the woman who took down a billionaire with nothing more than a slap of truth. As weeks passed, the story of Ashley's bold actions continued to make waves. It was no longer just about a single incident on a private jet. It had become a movement. People everywhere were talking about Ashley, a flight attendant who had taken down a billionaire CEO with nothing but her courage and the conviction to stand up for herself. The attention she had received wasn't just limited to media outlets. It had sparked conversations in boardrooms, classrooms, and even living rooms across the country. People from all walks of life had found themselves inspired by what Ashley had done, and it wasn't just about the slap. It was about what that moment represented. In the wake of her decision to stand up to Marcus Strickland, many began to question the power dynamics in their own lives. It wasn't just wealthy CEOs who took people for granted. It was happening everywhere, at work, in schools, even in relationships. The story had sparked a fire in people who had long felt invisible, and they were now demanding respect. Marcus Strickland, despite his apologies, was still facing the consequences of what had happened. He had made amends with Ashley, but that didn't erase the damage done to his reputation. His company was struggling. Investors were pulling back. Contracts were being delayed. And all of this because of one moment when he thought he could use his power to belittle someone else. It wasn't just his business that was in jeopardy. His entire worldview was crumbling. The very foundation of his success, his ability to control and dominate, had been shattered by a woman who refused to back down. One morning, as Marcus sat in his office, staring out over the city skyline, he realized just how much he had lost. He wasn't angry anymore. He was just lost. The man who had once thrived on power and control was now questioning whether he had ever truly understood what leadership meant. He had learned a painful lesson. True leadership wasn't about exerting dominance over others. It was about earning respect and treating people with dignity. Meanwhile, Ashley continued to work, but something had changed within her. She wasn't just a flight attendant anymore. She had become a symbol of empowerment, not just for people in her industry, but for anyone who had ever felt powerless. She had shown the world that standing up for yourself, no matter who you are or where you come from, could have a lasting impact. It wasn't about violence. It was about the courage to refuse to accept mistreatment. She knew she had done the right thing, and that certainty brought her peace. But the attention was beginning to take a toll. Everywhere she went, people recognized her. Some praised her, Others criticized her for being too bold. There were those who called her a hero, and there were those who said she had gone too far. But Ashley didn't care. She knew what she had done, and she knew why she had done it. And that was enough. Yet, as time passed, something unexpected happened. Marcus Strickland reached out to her once more. This time, his tone was different. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He wasn't trying to fix what had been broken. He simply wanted to talk. "I've spent a lot of time thinking about what happened," Marcus said, "and I realize now that I was wrong. I treated you like you were less than me. I assumed that my power could make me untouchable. But I was wrong. You taught me something that no one else ever could. You taught me that power isn't about control, it's about respect." Ashley listened to him quietly. She had heard the apology before, but this time it felt different. She wasn't angry with him anymore. She had moved past the need for an apology. She had made her peace with what happened. "I'm glad you see that," Ashley said, her voice calm but firm. "But it wasn't just about me. It was about everyone who gets treated like they're invisible. You weren't the first person to make me feel less than. But I'm not the kind of person who stays quiet about it anymore." Marcus paused, taking in her words. He knew that he had a long way to go in earning back the trust he had lost, not just from Ashley, but from everyone who had witnessed his downfall. The road ahead was going to be difficult, but he was determined to make the changes that needed to be made. And Ashley? She continued on with her life, knowing that she had done something bigger than herself. She had stood up to power, and in doing so, had given others the courage to do the same. In the end, it wasn't about the slap. It wasn't even about the CEO. It was about the moment when someone who had been overlooked for so long finally decided to take control of her own story. And that, as Ashley had learned, was the true power. Months passed since that fateful flight, and life for both Ashley and Marcus had evolved in ways neither could have anticipated. For Ashley, the recognition had brought both opportunities and challenges. Her story was everywhere, a beacon of courage for those who had long been silenced. People reached out to her from all walks of life. Workers, business owners, even others in the service industry who had suffered under the same heavy hand of inequality. She found herself at the center of a movement she hadn't expected, and yet, she embraced it. She began speaking at events, offering her perspective on standing up for oneself, and empowering others to find their voices in a world that often silenced them. As her platform grew, Ashley remained grounded, knowing that her true mission was not to bask in the spotlight, but to inspire others to take charge of their own lives. The media coverage continued, but Ashley never lost sight of what truly mattered. She still worked her job, still served those who boarded the plane she worked on, but now she did so with a quiet strength that commanded respect. Her interactions with passengers were warm but firm, and her colleagues looked up to her. She was no longer just a flight attendant. She was a leader, a role model, and someone who had set a new standard. Marcus, on the other hand, found himself in a much more complicated position. The apology he had offered to Ashley had been sincere, but it hadn't fixed everything. His company was still struggling. The trust of his employees and investors had been deeply shaken, and his reputation, once polished and pristine, had been forever tarnished. He had learned a hard lesson, the kind that could only be taught by someone who had nothing to lose. Marcus knew he would never be able to undo the damage done, but he also knew that he couldn't keep running from it. He had spent years building his empire, relying on power, money, and control. But he realized that true leadership wasn't about dominance. It was about earning respect and being accountable for one's actions. It was a realization that came too late, but it was a start. One evening, after months of reflection and a series of difficult decisions, Marcus called a meeting with his board of directors. He had come to terms with the fact that his approach to business needed to change. He wasn't going to be the same CEO who had belittled people, who thought he could control every situation with money and power. He had learned the value of humility, and it was time to rebuild his company with that principle at the core. During the meeting, Marcus spoke openly about the changes he wanted to make. He acknowledged the damage that had been done to his team and his company, and he outlined a new vision for the future, one that prioritized integrity, transparency, and respect. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to happen overnight, but Marcus was willing to take the necessary steps. He knew that rebuilding trust was a long, difficult process, but he was prepared to do the work. As time went on, Marcus began to make progress. His company slowly started to regain its footing, and while it would never be the same as it once was, it was a company that now operated on a foundation of respect and shared values. He was still wealthy, still powerful, but he was no longer blinded by the need to control everything. He had learned to listen to those around him, to his employees, and even to his own heart. Meanwhile, Ashley's influence continued to grow. She had made her mark, not just on that plane, but in the world. The bravery she had shown had inspired countless others to stand up, to refuse to accept being treated as less than. Ashley was now the head of her own foundation, dedicated to helping workers and those who had been overlooked or mistreated find their voice and power. As for Marcus, he had come to realize that true power came not from dominating others, but from lifting them up. One day, as he sat in a meeting with some of his key partners, Marcus received a message. It was from Ashley. She had invited him to speak at an event she was hosting, one that focused on leadership and integrity. It was an unexpected gesture, but one that he knew he had to accept. He had learned that some things, like respect, were worth working for, and sometimes, the best way to move forward was to acknowledge the people who had helped you see things differently. When the day of the event arrived, Marcus stood on stage in front of a crowd of thousands. He didn't speak about the money, the success, or the power he once had. Instead, he spoke about humility, about learning from mistakes, and about how one person's actions, someone like Ashley, could change the course of a life, and even the direction of an entire company. And when he finished speaking, the applause was loud, not because he was Marcus Strickland, the CEO of Strict Industries, but because he had become someone worthy of that respect. As Ashley's foundation began to grow and gain more recognition, she became a beacon of empowerment for workers across the country. What started as a moment of defiance on a private jet had turned into a larger movement, one that reached beyond the walls of boardrooms and luxury jets. Ashley's message was clear. Respect and dignity are fundamental rights that should never be withheld, no matter one's role or status. Her foundation, now officially known as the Voice of the Underdog, became a platform for marginalized voices. People who had been mistreated in their workplaces, those who had been told they were not enough, reached out for help. Ashley listened to their stories, offering them resources, guidance, and, most importantly, the courage to stand up for themselves. She was no longer just a flight attendant or a symbol of one powerful moment. She was a leader, and her leadership was making a difference in ways she never thought possible. Meanwhile, Marcus Strickland continued to rebuild his empire, but not in the way he had once imagined. He had learned that money, power, and influence weren't the true markers of success. His company was gradually regaining its footing, but it was different now. Marcus no longer saw people as tools to be used or discarded. Instead, he treated them as partners, as equals. His team noticed the change in him. The once dominant CEO who ruled with an iron fist now worked collaboratively with his employees, seeking their input and valuing their perspectives. It wasn't easy for Marcus. The scars from his past actions still lingered, and the road to redemption was long. But he was willing to do the work. He began focusing on the company's values, integrity, fairness, and transparency, and gradually, the culture within Strict began to shift. One day, Marcus received an invitation to attend an event hosted by Ashley's foundation. He hesitated at first, unsure of what his presence at such an event would mean, but he knew it was time to face the consequences of his past actions. When the day of the event arrived, Marcus walked into the grand hall, his heart heavy with the knowledge that he was stepping into a room filled with people who had been affected by the very type of arrogance he had once embodied. But he also knew that the person he was today was not the same person who had dismissed Ashley all those months ago. He had changed, and he was ready to face the people he had wronged. As he walked through the door, Ashley saw him and paused. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, there was a quiet understanding between them. Marcus wasn't the same man who had disrespected her on the jet. He had acknowledged his mistakes and was taking responsibility. Ashley didn't speak at first. She simply nodded in his direction, acknowledging his presence without saying a word. It wasn't about forgiveness, it was about growth. After the event, Marcus approached Ashley. "I want to thank you," he said. "Not just for what you did, but for what you've taught me. You taught me that true leadership isn't about power. It's about understanding, respecting others, and being humble enough to learn from your mistakes." Ashley listened quietly, her expression unreadable. "I'm not here for your thanks," she said softly. "I'm here because people like me have been silenced for far too long. And if anything, I hope that you'll continue to be a better version of yourself, not just for your company, but for the people who work for you." Marcus nodded, understanding the weight of her words. He knew he had a long way to go, but the path forward was clear. Meanwhile, Ashley's foundation continued to flourish. She had built something lasting, something that would ensure that her fight for justice didn't end with one moment of defiance. She had created a movement that would inspire generations to come. Her work was far from over, but with every life she touched, every voice she helped amplify, Ashley knew she was changing the world in ways she could never have imagined. And Marcus, though he had made his mistakes, had learned a valuable lesson. That leadership was not about being at the top, but about lifting others up. Together, they had both learned that true power came from respect, humility, and the courage to change. Months had passed, but the ripple effect of Ashley's bold stand on that private jet continued to impact both her and Marcus in ways they had never imagined. Ashley's foundation, now thriving, had helped thousands of people find their voices, empowering those who had long been silenced. With every new success story, her resolve grew stronger. She was no longer just a woman who had stood up for herself. She was now a leader of a movement. The message she spread was clear: respect was not a privilege for the powerful, it was a right. For everyone. Through her work, Ashley helped individuals from all walks of life break free from the constraints of fear and insecurity. Employees, business owners, and everyday people who had once felt invisible now had the courage to speak up. The work Ashley had done was monumental, but she never allowed herself to be consumed by it. Her passion for justice and equality continued to fuel her, but she remained humble, always aware that her journey was about more than just her own success. She made it clear that the spotlight was never her goal. It was about creating lasting change. As her foundation grew, Ashley's platform became a rallying point for workers' rights, and she was regularly invited to speak at high-profile events. The change she had sparked was real, and more people were beginning to understand that standing up for yourself and others was the only way to break the cycle of mistreatment. But as Ashley's influence grew, so did the pressures that came with it. She found herself constantly juggling her professional life and the immense responsibility of leading a movement. It wasn't easy, but Ashley knew that the work she was doing was worth every ounce of effort. She received messages from around the country, some praising her courage, others asking for her guidance. It was overwhelming at times, but she knew that she had to keep going. Meanwhile, Marcus had continued to rebuild strict tech industries, but his path had not been without difficulty. The company was growing again, but Marcus knew that it would never be the same. The lessons he had learned from his own mistakes had reshaped his leadership style. He was no longer the ruthless CEO who saw people as tools to achieve his goals. Instead, he focused on fostering an environment of respect, understanding, and collaboration. He met with his employees regularly, asking for their feedback and listening to their concerns. It was a far cry from the CEO he once was, and the change was noticed. Though Strictech's profits were rising, it wasn't just the money that mattered anymore. The culture within the company was stronger, healthier, and more inclusive. But Marcus was still haunted by the memory of that day on the jet. He had been humiliated, forced to confront his own failings, and though he had apologized to Ashley, he knew that he could never truly undo the damage he had done. The reality was that Ashley's slap had done more than just change the course of his career. It had changed the course of his life. It had forced him to confront the very core of his identity, and in doing so, he had learned to value things he had once taken for granted: honesty, humility, and accountability. Despite his efforts to move forward, Marcus still struggled with the weight of his past actions. He had become a better man, but the scars were there, reminders of the arrogance and entitlement he had once lived by. It was a constant battle to prove to himself and to the world that he had changed. As fate would have it, the two paths, Ashley's and Marcus's, would cross once more. One evening, at a charity event hosted by Ashley's foundation, Marcus was invited to speak. He had hesitated at first, unsure if his presence would be welcome, but he knew that this was part of his journey. He had to face the consequences of his past actions head-on. When he arrived at the event, Ashley was already there, greeting guests and speaking with supporters. Their eyes met from across the room, and for a moment, neither spoke. There was a mutual understanding, a recognition of the growth they had both undergone. As the evening progressed, Marcus found himself listening to Ashley as she spoke about the importance of standing up for what is right. Her words resonated deeply with him, reminding him of the powerful lesson she had taught him all those months ago. When it was Marcus's turn to speak, he took the stage with a newfound sense of humility. He didn't talk about his success, his wealth, or his position at the top. Instead, he spoke about his mistakes, about how one person's actions, Ashley's actions, had made him rethink everything he thought he knew about leadership and power. "I was wrong," Marcus admitted to the crowd. "I treated people like they were beneath me. I was arrogant, dismissive, and blinded by my own sense of importance. But Ashley taught me something invaluable. She taught me that respect isn't something you can demand. It's something you earn." The room fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Marcus continued, "I am grateful for the lesson and for the opportunity to change. I owe Ashley and everyone who has suffered under my leadership more than I could ever express." As he finished his speech, the applause was loud and genuine. It wasn't because of his wealth or his status. It was because he had taken ownership of his past and shown the world that change was possible. In that moment, Marcus Strickland wasn't just a CEO. He was a man who had learned, and was still learning, the true meaning of leadership. And as he looked out into the crowd, his eyes met Ashley's once more. This time, there was no animosity, no shame. There was only mutual respect, a respect that had been earned, not given. As time continued to pass, the profound changes sparked by that one moment on the private jet began to settle into both Marcus and Ashley's lives. For Ashley, the journey was far from over. The respect she had gained and the platform she had built allowed her to keep pushing forward with her mission. The voice of the underdog continued to grow, helping countless individuals stand up for themselves in the face of adversity. She had become not just a leader, but a beacon for those who felt powerless. Her impact was undeniable. What started as one woman's courage had grown into a movement that was reshaping how people thought about power, respect, and self-worth. Ashley traveled the country, meeting with workers, attending rallies, and speaking at events where her message was received with admiration and gratitude. She didn't just talk about equality, she lived it. She treated everyone with respect, no matter their background or position, and her actions reinforced her words. But despite all the success and recognition, Ashley never forgot the struggles that had led her to this point. She still remembered what it was like to be overlooked, to be dismissed by people who thought they had the power to decide her worth. Those experiences fueled her every day, and she continued to work tirelessly, making sure that the people she represented would never have to feel invisible again. As for Marcus, his journey had been just as transformative, though in a different way. He had lost much, his team, his reputation, and the sense of invincibility that had once defined him. But in the process, he had gained something far more valuable, self-awareness. The humility he had learned was hard-earned, but it was real. Strict tech industries had begun to thrive again, but this time, it wasn't just because of profits or market shares. It was because Marcus had learned to lead with empathy, to truly listen to those around him, and to prioritize the well-being of his employees over his own ego. He spent countless hours working alongside his team, asking for their input, and being open to criticism. Slowly, but surely, the company had become a place where respect was the cornerstone, and people felt valued. Marcus knew he still had a long way to go, but he was finally on the right path. In the months following the event at the charity gala, Marcus had begun to make amends in other areas of his life. He reached out to former colleagues and business partners, offering apologies for his past behavior and taking responsibility for the toxic culture he had fostered. Many accepted his apologies, and some even expressed admiration for his willingness to change. But there were others who, like Ashley, made it clear that words alone were not enough. They wanted to see actions, and Marcus was ready to show them that he could change. It was a slow process, but each day was a step toward redemption. One afternoon, as Marcus was reviewing some new proposals at his office, his assistant came in with a message. Ashley had reached out to him. She had invited him to a dinner, not as a business meeting, but as a simple gesture of recognition. At first, Marcus was hesitant. He had learned that his past mistakes could not be erased with a simple meeting. But he knew that this was part of his journey. He had worked hard to become a better man, and this dinner, whatever the outcome, would be another opportunity to demonstrate his growth. When they sat down together that evening, the air between them was not thick with tension or resentment. Instead, there was a quiet understanding between them, an acknowledgement that both had been through something life-changing and that, in some strange way, they had helped each other grow. "I never expected us to be here," Marcus said, breaking the silence. "But I'm glad we are." Ashley nodded, her eyes steady. "You've changed, Marcus. And I'm proud of that. But it wasn't easy. And it wasn't just about you and me. It's about everyone who gets treated like they don't matter. What you did helped me make that clear. To the world." Marcus looked down for a moment, reflecting. "I'm sorry for what I did," he said, the weight of his words genuine. "And I'm grateful for everything I've learned because of it. I know I have a lot to prove, but I want you to know that I'm committed to being a better person. Not just for myself, but for the people I work with, for the people I lead." Ashley smiled, a quiet smile of understanding. "That's all any of us can do. Just keep trying to be better." The evening ended on a note of mutual respect, the unspoken understanding that both had changed. For Ashley, it was another victory, not one that came with applause or public recognition, but one that mattered deeply. She had made a difference, not just for herself, but for others who had suffered in silence. As the years went by, Marcus continued his journey of growth, and Ashley remained at the forefront of her movement, making a lasting impact on society. Together, they had shown that change was possible, even for those who seemed beyond redemption. And as the world moved forward, it carried with it the lessons of two people who had dared to stand up for what was right. In this gripping Black story, witness the dramatic journey of Ashley, a flight attendant who took a bold stand against a billionaire CEO, changing her life and inspiring a movement. This Black story explores themes of respect, humility, and the power of standing up for yourself, even when facing overwhelming odds. From Ashley's shocking act of defiance to the powerful lessons learned by Marcus, the CEO, this narrative delves into the transformation of two individuals from starkly different backgrounds. Their paths cross in an unexpected way, as Ashley's courage leads to an empowered future for countless others. This Black story is not just about one woman's fight for equality, but about how one moment can change everything, shaping the world around us. As Marcus learns humility and respect through his own struggles, Ashley's foundation becomes a symbol of empowerment for those who have been overlooked and mistreated. Through their journey, this Black story emphasizes that true leadership is not about wealth or control, but about integrity, growth, and respect for others. With each step, Ashley and Marcus rewrite the narrative of their lives, proving that change is possible for anyone, no matter their past. As the movement grows, this Black story continues to resonate with people from all walks of life, showing that standing up for what is right can leave a lasting impact on society.